George Orwell would, condemn himself for not thinking of 1/100th of the things which this act does. George Orwell is the mildest form compared to this act. We all know what George Orwell means. We all know what Orwellian means. Big Brother is watching you. He's watching every movement of yours. This legalizes it. This statutorizes it. This institutionalizes it. And in a vibrant democracy like India.
This is why you say this act does not criminalize foreigners, it criminalizes the idea of foreigners. That is what, in fact, we are attacking. We are converting every foreigner into an intruder, into an alien, basically into an unwanted person.
Absolutely. And it is very strange why this is being done.
Hello and welcome to a special interview for The Wire. Whilst public attention has been focused on the Waqf Act and President Trump's tariffs, the government has passed an Immigration and Foreigners Act which is deeply troubling and greatly concerning. It's been called unconstitutional and un-Indian, as well as a license to harass, detain and deport without rhyme, reason or remedy. Joining me to explain why this act is so worrying is leading Supreme Court lawyer, Rajya Sabha MP and Congress National Spokesperson, Abhishek Singhvi. Mr. Singhvi, in an article you wrote for the Hindustan Times last week, you called the Immigration and Foreigners Act 2025 unconstitutional and un-Indian. You say it's a legislative monster masquerading as reform, a license to harass, detain and deport without rhyme, reason or remedy. That's pretty strong criticism. So before I come to the details, am I right in saying you are implacably opposed to this act?
Absolutely. If at all, those adjectives are a slight understatement. This is quite a weird act, apart from being something which is intended to go unnoticed, because we tend to think of ourselves as citizens of a country. Foreigners be damned. People coming from outside can be ignored. And as I said, implacably opposed is the mildest form you can describe my opposition to it. I want to say this, and as you go down the sections, you will see how each of those adjectives are valid. But I want to say this, Karan, that this really reflects a mindset. This is not the section or the detail, which we'll come to in a minute. It's the mindset of controlled freakism, anti-freedom, especially dissent, anti-freedom of expression, intrusive, spying, surveillance, and all these nice adjectives we have, Vishwaguru, Athithi Devo Bhava, the guest in India. That is all nice rhetoric, but this is the antithesis of that rich legacy and heritage of India. And one more sentence on the legal part. This is the general mindset which I'm talking about. On the purely legal part, I have, in my long experience, seen hardly any act which has this humongous, excessive delegation. Delegate everything as the central government may decide. The phraseology is delightfully vague.
Okay, let's then at this point come to some of the details of the act. In your Hindustan Times article, you identified 13 key problems. I want to go through the major ones one by one. First, you say it grants the government a blank check to define, detain and deport anyone they deem inconvenient. And you add, as a result, any foreigner can be cast out with no questions asked. You believe this is a consequence of Section 3 of the Act. What precisely does Section 3 say?
Section 3 has 2 or 3 parts. A. B. It is largely new. There are 4 preceding acts in 1920, 1939, 1946, etc. and 2000 also. None of them have it. This section is new. And the first part of it gives this delightful phrase which they use again and again. The first part of the first proviso. On any other ground as the central government may decide. So you have well-known ground. You have public order, you have morality, you have defense of India, national security. I can understand that. But today, if they do not like the views of Karan Thapar, or I am a left-wing so-called Jholawala, or I am anti-government, on such other grounds is the phrase there. And you make them up as you go along. The second, immediately next part is, On this decision, whether we don't like Karan Thapar or we like Karan Thapar, the immigration officer's decision shall be final. Now, these finality clauses, by the way, don't mean that courts can't interfere. For 100 years, in fact, for more than 500 years in England, they've been used. And the English courts and the Indian courts have said they don't oust courts. But as far as executive, alternate remedy, institutional remedy, statutory remedy is concerned, that great, grand immigration officer is final. And there is no oversight above him.
Let me come in at that point. You're saying that the decision of the immigration officer is final and binding. You're saying there are no appeals, no hearings thereafter, no oversight. Most major democracies do actually have room for appeals. They do have room for second opinion. This is where the Indian Immigration and Foreigners Act differs from other acts in other major democracies.
Karan is a double whammy. 3 was never available in this form to the predecessor immigration officer in all these 100 years. Never. So, first whammy is you enact a draconian 3 now, giving him many more powers. And second, you give him no appeal, no challenge. And third, when I challenged this in the parliament, the Honorable Home Minister said, but earlier also there was no appeal. Well, earlier he didn't have these powers. And you go to the website of the US, which is pretty anti-immigration for a long time. You have 700 immigration judges. You have a board of immigration appeals. So what they are saying is, yes, Mr. Thapar, you can go to the courts of India, judicial review is available. We understand how tardy it is, how expensive it is. For a bewildered foreigner, it's an external remedy. Where is the institutional, statutory, internal remedy is the question.
And what you're saying is particularly worrying is the fact that apart from deporting people or denying them entry on grounds of national security and other legitimate grounds, they can also cite what you call or any other ground. Or any other ground could be anything the immigration officer deems and wants to choose.
The central government may specify it by an order and the immigration officer will act on it. I have no doubt that if they started specifying grounds that you are a dissenting person, the courts will ultimately strike it down. We have a robust system. But that's not the point. What is the law you're enacting? Where is the internal remedy? And let me once use the word deport so many times, Karan. The next provision, 3(2), is the reverse of deport. If a foreigner wants to go out, they can hold him back. And the language there is, if his presence in India is required by any agency on any ground which the central government may specify. Please mark my words. You are talking of deport. I'm talking of me wanting to go out. Now, there may be no FIR against me. There may be no actual case against me. I may be required as a witness in some murder. I may be required just for whatever, I don't know. The language is, if his presence is required in India by any agency on any ground the central government may specify, you can't go back.
So he can't self-deport himself should he choose to do so.
The Indian who self-deported in USA, you cannot do that under this new provision, and this is again not there earlier. And again, one more sentence after this. The decision of the immigration officer on this is final. This is a mantra.
There is one more aspect of Section 3. The immigration officer also has the authority to monitor every move a foreigner makes. You say in your Hindustan's article that he can monitor transit, stay, movement. He can monitor everything, as you put it, from biometrics to whispered thoughts. This seems like a sweeping power. Tell me more about this aspect of Section 3.
Now, there are 2 provisions here which you must join together. As I said, Section 3 is the heart of this. So the point you're talking about is really Section 3(3). So we've done 3(1) and 3(2) in the previous discussion. This is 3(3), followed by the provision in 7. And let me, without going into legalese or technicality, explain very briefly. The combination of 3(3) and 7 is that it's actually a George Orwell and Kafka cocktail. The officer has the right to track you completely. Where you go, how you move, where you stay, report, fill up forms, and those people who are associating with you, the landlords or the carriers or the hospitals or the education institutions, are charged with penalty and prosecution about filling up those forms and reporting Karan Thapar's movement. That is one part. They are like reporting restrictions which I had when I visited Pakistan, and Pakistan has for Indians and vice versa. I'm not saying you do them away for Pakistanis. Yes, but this is for every foreigner in that sense. Number 2 is 7, which takes it further. 7 says a number of, I think there are more than 10 subclauses, particularized subclauses. They are specify the time and routes by which a foreigner can enter, prohibit his departure, be in India only at places specified, present himself for examination anytime, report to authorities at specified times and days, furnish his biometric, as you said, subject himself to a medical examination. Most interesting. Prohibit him from associating with persons of a specified description.
Can I interrupt? Because we're in danger of getting lost in the detail, and I would like the audience to understand the main point you're making. So let me repeat it and correct me if I'm repeating it correctly. You say under Section 7, a foreigner can be told where to live, who to talk to, when to report, what to disclose, how to behave. And you say, as a result, foreigners are not treated as guests, but as intruders. That is the impact of Section 7.
The mindset is clearly that you are an unwanted non-guest, you are an intruder, you are almost an enemy alien. Now, the point is nobody is suggesting that the average foreigner will be dealt with like that. After all, India wants tourism. The government will be in bad trouble if they start behaving. The point is not that. The point is the selectivity and the power, the control freak power which it gives you to select one Singhvi, one Thapar, one XYZ as against not selecting the mass. Now, in that process, you are actually tracking them. You're not stopping them. But everything you do, imagine associating. So the idea is actually where it comes from, according to me, is a certain view of liberal, dissenting, open voices, a certain view of supposed anti-nationalism, a certain view of what is security, a certain view of who is a jholawala. Now, those people, what they do, where they meet, there are forms. 90% of the time, the form may be ignored. But the fact of the matter is that the power is there. Big brother is watching you, controlling you, and tracking you.
In fact, you go one step further. You say, and I'm quoting you, this act does not criminalize foreigners, it criminalizes the idea of foreigners. That is, in fact, you say, why even criticism of the government could become grounds for harassing a foreign visitor to our country.
Absolutely. That is how they will use this on any grounds the government may specify. So I will track you very much more closely, but I will not track me because I'm okay, I'm kosher. We must link this with 8, 9, and 10 without going into details, the Trinity. It says specifically that if you go to a hospital, three institutions are dealt with in this Trinity: educational institution, hospital, and landlord. They have to fill up forms. They have to tell this Thapar came on so-and-so date, stayed so many days, went from here to where. And if you are over, if you even by mistake leave out anything in the form, forget the foreigner.
Once again, let me interrupt and clarify for the audience what you're saying. You're saying the act requires 3 categories of people: landlords, doctors, and universities, to monitor foreigners and to monitor those foreigners as if these landlords, doctors, and universities are unpaid informants of the government. You write, every cough, every address change, every college or hospital admission must be reported to the government on pain of punishment.
I've also written somewhere, I think, that they have been co-opted as snooping partners and surveillance partners of the government. Unwilling, without consent, co-opted. But the point is that if you fail to fill up the prescribed form, and the prescribed form can change every month, every 2 months, then there is further penalty and prosecution on you, forget the foreigner. And there is a third category.
We'll come to the third category in a moment's time. But the first thing you're saying is not only is this act onerous and offensive in its treatment of foreigners visiting the country, it also makes demands and impositions on Indians who are landlords, Indians who are doctors, Indians who run universities, and those people have to monitor foreigners who come to visit them or study at their institutions on pain of punishment. It makes demands, therefore, on Indians as much as it does on foreigners.
Absolutely, it does, on pain of punishment and prosecution and penalty. And had it happened in another country, we proud days Indians would have made fun of China. We would have rightly said, look, these are snooping surveillance tactics. Big brother is watching you. Or Cuba. Well, I'm not saying it is happening like that yet. But the power to do it and to do it selectively is very much here.
This is, in effect, just short of what Trump is imposing upon American Ivy League universities, which Harvard is attempting to resist, which Columbia has agreed to give into. This is only just short of that. It makes demands to monitor students, to monitor their admissions, their address change, as you say, even their coughs and colds.
So absolutely, if there is a particular person following a course in Marxism in some university, The idea is to track him. Yes, at the moment you're right, the Trump level of saying that even the curriculum and what you teach should be regulated or approved, that has not been said here. We are now talking of the movements in top university campuses, who studies what, where does he move around, what is the student movement, whom he's associating with, and at least the forms are there, and the rest of it is covered by the landlords and the other people.
Hi, I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch the interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me. Now, so far, we've been talking about the onerous impact of Section 3 and its 3 provisos, read conjointly with Section 7, Section 8, and Section 9. But there are other sections, which you point out in your Hindustan Times article, which are equally worrying. Section 14 empowers the government to shut down any premises visited by foreigners without evidence, without charge, and with no specified thresholds for invocation. You call this guilt by association.
Some of your viewers must read this 14. It's actually, it would be comic if it were not tragic. It says the third party can be directed by the government to close such premises as frequented by such foreigners. That's the language. I don't believe it, but you can read it. So if I am an objectionable foreigner and I'm visiting your pub frequently, the power is there. I'm not saying you can excise it or not, that will be excised selectively.
So this means that a foreigner with, say, for example, a venereal disease could get the doctor he visits into trouble, and that doctor may be required to shut down his surgery because the government doesn't like it.
Well, I don't know about the shutting down of a doctor, because that will be essential medical facility. But the principle is the same. Frequented by such person. Frequented by such person means a social gathering, a spot he likes, a university, a park, a place. And the transportation sector is the other big snooping partner, co-opted unwillingly without consent. The transportation sector actually must be pulling out its hair in despair. Everything like a Jarampatri of a foreigner traveling by land, sea, or air must be filled up in prescribed form on very heavy penalties on airlines, on ships, on railroads, on buses. That's there. Their compliance cost and their fear and their harassment must be very high now.
But this also means that foreigners have to provide extensive details of their lives to airlines that they fly on, to railway authorities whose trains they're using, to ship companies whose ships they're using. Does it also apply to Uber?
Any form of transportation, sir, land, air, or sea. The concept only 4 years ago, which the government opposed, which the Supreme Court embedded in Article 21, the concept of privacy, hardly 3-4 years old, is blown to smithereens. Smithereens. There is no question of privacy. Why? All because you're a foreigner. Oh, Indians may have privacy. I'm going to come to that. This is another fundamental mistake, saying that the Indian constitution, Indian concept, Indian rights are only for domestic Indians, not for foreigners. That's a somebody has not seen a book called the Constitution of India when drafting this. Somebody has not understood that a large number of these so-called foreign citizens are also, by the way, PIOs and OCIs. But that apart, forget them. Take a pure foreigner, not a PIO, not a OCI. Indian Constitution, Karan, and India should be proud of this, is one of the few in the world which has large tracts of our constitutional fundamental rights given to persons and not merely to citizens. We are ahead of America and other countries in this. There are particular articles which are vital to our constitution, which apply to citizens and non-citizens alike.
So you're saying to me that at multiple levels, this Immigration and Foreigners Act breaches the fundamental rights conferred by our constitution, not just on citizens, but on anyone present on the landmass of India.
This act is now an act, is completely vulnerable to challenge. I have no doubt it will be challenged eventually with appropriate person, appropriate cause of action. And it will fall foul of many constitutional provisions, which, by the way, apply to non-citizens, like Article 14 and 21. Baba Sahib Ambedkar said that these two articles are the heart and soul of our constitution. Both apply to non-citizens. Article 25, for example, preach, profess and practice your religion. I'm giving only an example. They apply to non-citizens. Article 20, the right against self-incrimination, that doesn't arise yet. They haven't reached that yet. But 20, preventive detention 22. The Indian Constitution, our Constituent Assembly, was proud in times of vociferous tendencies to provide these rights. This act is made as if a mockery of those rights.
But in fact, it actually goes further. And this is the bizarre part of the act. Under Section 15, the Indian government can determine the nationality of a foreigner. You say, for instance, if he or she carries two passports, Big Brother will decide which country he wants to anchor you to. So if you're, take for example, both British and Canadian, the Indian government will decide whether they want to see you as British or Canadian. And this would be particularly invidious in the case of people who are both, say, to take an example, Pakistani and British. They will only be viewed in their Pakistani nationality. Their British nationality will be ignored.
It may be even more sinister than that on your last question. Today, there is a growing movement across the globe for dual citizenship. It is eventually going to come to India. It was recommended in the original Pravasi report, but it will take some time to come to India. Today, across different continents, it's a growing trend. You, Karan Thapar, are a citizen of country A and B. Both countries have accepted you, you have no problem. You come to India as a foreign citizen. It suits India, it suits me as the immigration officer to treat you as a citizen of A. Either because there is no extradition treaty there, or because it is easier to catch you there, or it is protections are less, whatever, I don't know. He then declares you as an anchor of A, whereas you may be living all your life in B. How on earth can India decide that Karan Thapar's citizenship A be ignored and B be taken, or vice versa? This is done for a self-serving purpose, that I will decide and then I will act according to that law, whether depending on immigration treaties, deportation arrangements, etc., etc.
Now, all of this is already deeply worrying, deeply concerning, and as you said, it fundamentally breaches the fundamental rights of our constitution. But it becomes even worse when you look at Section 26. You point out a head constable, and I'll repeat that, just a head constable is elevated to the level of what you call a super commissioner. In other words, the lowest rung of authority is handed the highest responsibility along with coercive powers. So all these powers will be exercised by a head constable.
There is a well-established principle of law, Karan, that when draconian powers like this are given, one is that all safeguards, appeals, etc. should be there. A second is the power of arrest is given specifically in many, many statutes, in draconian ones, by a person not below the rank of X or Y. Normally it is said superintendent of police. Sometimes it says additional commissioner for very serious offense. The more draconian the power, the greater the need to exercise restraint and maturity and a level of seniority which comes along with that power. The reverse has happened in 26. 26, we are talking now only of arrest. We're not talking of other things. The other things are with the immigration officer, who's the final boss. That's bad enough. Now along comes arrest. And it's amazing, any officer of police not below the rank of head constable may arrest without warrant. Any person who has contravened or against whom a reasonable suspicion exists that he has contravened what? Your famous Section 3. So all the things we've discussed on 3, including 7, 8, 9, I, the constable, have to have that suspicion on anybody's oral complaint without warrant. I will land up. Now forget the actual constable. I mean, the constables must be celebrating at this power. And the ministers must be weeping, because even ministers don't have this power. But imagine the harassment. Imagine the corruption. Imagine the bureaucratic tapes in which you can wind up 10 times, and the fear and the threat to a foreigner. The poor foreigner doesn't even know the system. He's staying in a Barsati, and somebody will say, you better do like the head constable is coming.
Let me at this point come to two conclusions in a sense that you draw. You point out that the outcome of this act will be that it's not just about managing immigration. You say it's about institutionalizing unchecked authority and normalizing Kafkaesque imagery and Orwellian control. In other words, to put it in simple language, this act creates the worst of George Orwell's 1984 in India.
George Orwell would, condemn himself for not thinking of 1/100th of the things which this act does. George Orwell is the mildest form compared to this act. We all know what George Orwell means. We all know what Orwellian means. Big brother is watching you. He's watching every movement of yours. This legalizes it. This statutorizes it. This institutionalizes it. And in a vibrant democracy like India. And let me tell you, again I repeat, you may not use it against the vast number of foreigners, but the power, the residual power to do it is a big Damocles sword hanging on the head of everybody who wants to have free speech, dissent, speak their mind, great culture like India. We agree with you, we don't agree with you, they can say what they like. This is the threat, saying we've got a Damocles sword hanging over your head. That's the real point. And you are actually treating them as non-persons, again, non-foreign, not even as citizens, etc.
This is why you say this act does not criminalize foreigners, it criminalizes the idea of foreigners. That is what, in fact, we are attacking. We are converting every foreigner into an intruder, into an alien, basically into an unwanted person.
Absolutely. And it is very strange why this is being done. There are already ample powers in the law to do 90% of what you do to control genuine situations. You have a national security exception for everything. You have a public order exception. Which foreigner do you think can do any of these destructive activities in India without being caught under 100 laws? This is, the idea is different. The idea is control freak. Above all of this is control freak.
There's one other fear you have, Dr. Singhvi. You say, today this act targets suspicious foreigners. Tomorrow it may turn inward. The shadow it casts will not stop at the border. In other words, this could be the thin end of a terrible wedge that goes on to attack the freedom and rights of Indian citizens themselves.
India has robust traditions, robust case law, robust institutions like courts. But I have no doubt that this is what they would like to do. It doesn't mean they can do it or that they are doing it within the country also. It's a mindset which is reflected. The first step is to implement the mindset in areas where domestic control is relatively less, like domestic courts. Many of these, I understand, cannot be put here into operation. But do you not already find operational signs of complete intolerance of dissent, of watching you, of controlling you, of checking you, all these things about intrusion? We had these various things about Pegasus and WhatsApp intrusions, telling every service provider that you must have your server in India, raiding institutions and say, what is all this? This whole purpose, the larger mindset is what? That ultimate last word, last power must be with me, big brother.
And that is what the government is indicating. At the moment, it's indicating this enormous power and this enormous antipathy to foreigners, but it may come to a point where they indicate the same power and antipathy to their own fellow citizens.
Absolutely. It is a declaration that any free thinking, any liberalism, any open thinking is not permitted without Big Brother's nod. We are watching, we can act, we can control.
My last question. Not only are you a Rajya Sabha MP, not only are you a member of the Congress Working Committee and their senior national spokesperson, but you are also one of this country's most highly reputed, highly regarded lawyers. Will you yourself move the Supreme Court against this act?
Well, being a senior advocate, I litigate on behalf of others.
But you can litigate on behalf of yourself whenever you want.
Don't do normally, but there are plenty of people who must get a cause of action in the near future. These things are based on cause of action also. you must be a foreigner who is subjected to something which is unreasonable. A cause of action arises then, and then a petition is filed. I have no doubt, given the nature, this is hardly about 2 weeks old or 1 month old, so you have to give it time. Given the nature, you'll have enough foreigners, enough immigration counters, enough cases where this will be used rashly, and those cases will come whether I do it or somebody else does it. This is bound to hit the courts, and some of the egregious parts of this are bound to be looked at very seriously and, in my opinion, struck down.
Dr. Singhvi, thank you very much for opening our eyes to something which, as I said in the introduction, literally didn't get the attention it deserves because of the focus being on Trump's tariffs and the Waqf Act. But in many ways, what the government has passed as the Immigration and Foreigners Act is deeply concerning and worrying, and you pointed out the many reasons why we should be concerned and worried. I thank you for the time you've given me. Take care. Stay safe.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch The Interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me.